With more and more podcasts being made than ever before, and with more of those podcasts being visual podcasts than ever before, that introduces an extra element that we need to think about as podcast producers. And that is, where do we record our podcast? What should the set look like? What should the environment be that we are setting up in? And of course, if we have two people, one person talking to another, we want to see their faces. We want to look them in the eyes. We don't want to look in their ears, their hairy ear holes. We want to see both their eyes as they talk to each other, which means the cameras need to be cross-shooting. And then, of course, we want a wide shot. So generally, for two people, we need 3 cameras. Now, that means we have to have essentially a 3-sided studio space, because the 2 cameras that are cross-shooting our guests are going to see the sides of the set. The wide shot is going to see the back of the set, which means that when we come to choose a location or build a set with props on it, we need to think about all 3 dimensions. That takes up space, it costs money, and it takes setting up every time we want to do our podcast. Now, if you're a podcast studio or you're a producer that makes more than one podcast and you want a different look for each podcast, that means you've got to tear all that set down and put a new set up. Next time you go back to do the other podcast series, you've got to put the original set back up again. And all of that takes time. What if you could just flick your fingers and create a whole immersive studio each time you need it and save it as well? Well, now you can with Studio Generator AI. Studio Generator AI, as the name suggests, is an AI immersive studio generator for television studios, podcast studios, YouTube studios, office environments, warehouses, cathedrals and churches, and so much more. You can almost make any studio, totally immersive studio you want for your podcast or TV series or chat show that you want with Studio Generator AI, and you can do it for beer money. So how does Studio Generator AI work? Well, it relies on you transforming your podcast or studio space into a virtual studio. So you need a wraparound green screen. And that's easy to achieve. You just hang a curved curtain rail from the ceiling or from a frame, pull round a chroma key curtain, make sure it's properly lit, and you need it to be curved so it covers, so it's kind of a U shape, or maybe you could say a C shape. So it's curved round your set so that you can create the different studio sides to your studio. And then to create that studio, you need Studio Generator AI. So let's jump in and have a look at it. So the first thing to notice is that down here we have different categories of studio. So we have international news studios, and they will load in the carousel down here. And you can see as I click between each one, it will load into this preview window. It will also load a AI prompt down here that's relevant to the studio design that I am choosing. But you don't have to use one of those studio library style prompts if you don't want to. You can have a go at creating your totally bespoke studio space. Remember, we want in that prompt to describe what kind of an environment it is, describe the walls, describe the floor, describe any details on the walls, or any props or furniture that you might want in the studio. But having said that, remember that this is a studio background. So anything that you describe, that you try to put in the foreground, will then appear in your real virtual set. And in actual fact, most likely your virtual set will be you and your guest sitting on chairs in front of a chroma background. So you don't really need any foreground furniture. You might want to put a desk in your real virtual studio, in which case you want to make sure that there's no desk in the Studio Generator AI. And if you've already got your guests sitting on nice chairs, you want those chairs to appear in your virtual set. And so you want to make sure that the Studio Generator AI doesn't render any furniture. And I'll show you how to do that shortly. So this is the first stage. You can see this is broken up into different categories of studio. We have chat shows here, chat show studios. We've got multimedia studios if you want to make it look like you are in a big multimedia suite. So you can click on any of these and you can see that studio design up there. We have YouTube studios. So again, you can click on any of these in here and it will load up here for you to have a look at. And the prompt for that particular studio will appear down here. So you can go in here and edit this prompt and change anything about this prompt if you want to. I'm going to go back to International News Studios and I'm going to choose this one here, International News Large Studio 3. And here's the prompt for it. And we can change aspects of that prompt if we want. I'm going to leave it as it is. Now, what happens here is this is a style guide image. The AI will interpret this style guide and the prompt, and it will generate a preview studio. Don't worry at this stage if it doesn't look totally like the style prompt. We'll tweak that as we go. Now, you'll notice down here there's 4 buttons: seating, include chairs, don't include chairs, and desk, include desk, don't include desk. I'm going to leave this on chairs and desk at the moment, but remember what I said. If you're using a virtual studio, you're probably going to want to put your own chairs and desk in the virtual background. So you would probably want to switch those off, but just for the sake of this, so you understand what's going on, I'm going to leave these switched on. Then I'm going to click on Preview Studio. Now that's going to take this prompt and this style guide and start generating my own bespoke studio. Now this can take a little while. It can take up to 2 minutes to interpret that prompt and generate your first studio preview shot. Okay, so it's just popped up with our preview studio. Here it is. Here's the preview studio. And you can see, if you look carefully, there is a chair in the background there, and there's a nice desk here. And we've got this blue accent. In this preview studio stage, this always looks a little simpler than what we're initially hoping for with our style guide. But this is where the real magic begins. If we're not happy with that, we can go back and change our prompt and change this studio background, change anything here that we want to if we're not happy with that. And then we can come down, once we're happy with this studio, we can come down to step 2. And you can see that this has now, is no longer grayed out. So down here, we have this floor plan. And the subject is essentially, imagine the subject is essentially the desk, the central, it's the focus point of your studio. It's where all your action is going to take place. Whether you're putting a AI generated desk in there, or whether you are going to use a real desk in your studio. So this camera 1 camera is essentially showing this view. Now you might want it to be closer to this desk. So I'm going to drag camera 1 closer. And when I click on camera 1, you'll see down here, we've got some controls. So I can tilt the camera up and down. Okay, so maybe more of the ceiling or more of the floor, depending on what I want to frame up. The lens field of view. Now, this isn't calibrated in lens angle because, of course, lens angle is dependent on sensor size, camera sensor size. So it's much easier to think of it in field of view. How wide or narrow do we want that lens angle to be? Well, it's the establishing wide shot, so I want it to be quite wide, and actually 80 degrees is very wide. And then pan controls whether you want the camera to pan left or pan right. So I'm going to leave that central because I want a nice big wide shot there. So camera 2, if I have 2 people talking here, so maybe I have the presenter sitting here and I have the guest sitting here. So I want a nice 2-wide shot looking across at the guest sitting here, and I want a nice 2-wide shot looking back this way of the presenter looking at them. If I put them here, so this one is looking at the presenter and this one is looking at the guest, that would be fine. Then just a flat background would be fine. But what I would be doing if the 2 people are looking at each other is looking at them in profile, which is a really horrible, unflattering shot, because all we're really seeing is ears. What we want to see, of course, is eyes. That's where all the facial expression really comes from. So we want to see their eyes. So that means we need to move these cameras to here, so it's shooting across, and this one here, so it's shooting across. You can decide how close or far away from the desk you want it to be. I think I'm going to put it about here for now. And you can see when I click on these cameras, the controls for those cameras become active. Now at the moment, camera 3 and camera 2 are on pretty wide angle lenses. I don't want that those lenses to be so wide angle. I'll probably narrow that field of view down, but for now I'm just going to leave them on that wide shot. So what I'm going to do now is come down to step 3. I can choose whether I want this in high definition or 4K, depending on which subscription plan I've chosen, and it'll tell you here how many credits you're going to use for that subscription. Up here, because I've got an admin account, you can see that this the number of credits I have available would come up here normally. Now there's a chroma key button here as well. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to click this rendering and start that rendering while I explain this chroma key button. If we go back up to here, we have a video screen at the back here, and this has got an image which has been created by the AI. Depending on the prompts that you've put in the background, you can make that cityscapes during the day, maybe a nice cityscape at sunset, whatever you want. But what you can do, because you might want to run your own video stories or have guests pop up in that video screen. So what you can do is you can come down here and click this chroma key button, and that will render this out with a green chroma screen. So you can key whatever you want into that screen. Right, so we've clicked rendering, and what it's doing now is it's rendering out the view that each of these cameras have of our virtual studio based on their position, how close they are, what angle they're shooting from. So depending on where you put them around here, what angle we see of this studio. So again, that'll take a minute or two to render out those 3 shots. There's a lot of processing going on with this AI, so it does take a little bit of time. Right, okay, so that has now rendered out our shots. You can see the rendering has stopped. That took 219 seconds to render that, and it's rendered these shots in 1920 by 1080. So there is our wide shot of our virtual studio, and here are our side shots of the virtual studio, so that we can have a presenter sitting on one seat and the guest sitting on the other seat. And you can see that the cameras have effectively created that studio from that camera angle. So what we have is we have a 3-dimensional virtual set created using AI from a simple text prompt. Now we can then key each of those 3 backgrounds behind our 3 camera angles. Now in this case, my camera 2 and my camera 3 are too wide. I'd want close-ups of the presenter here and a close-up of the guest here. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to go in and change camera 3 and make that I think 45, and camera 2 I'm going to make that 45 too as well. Now, 2 things. First of all, we may need to pan those cameras around. Let me just start that render again. We may need to pan those close-up, now that we've zoomed in, those camera 2 and camera 3 left or right, and we can do that with this pan adjust control here. The other thing as well, you may have noticed, and you'll see when this comes up again, that actually we can download these images. We can save these images as the background images for our Virtual Studio Composite if we want. Or if we're using vMix, the high-end live streaming software, where you can create or you can buy studio templates, and they're quite expensive. They range from anything between $30 and several $100s. The average price for a vMix Virtual Studio is probably a couple of $100s, and you only have a set number of vMix templates because they're so hard to create. Essentially, you need to create a whole new 3D studio in 3D software, which can take days, weeks, and maybe months to get that looking just right, as opposed to using Studio Generator AI, where I can create it with a text prompt in a matter of minutes. But now, once we've got the studio that we want, you'll see there's an export as vMix template button, and that will export all of that studio with all the files that you need to bring into vMix and have a instant vMix studio design. Okay, so there is our new renders. So there's our wide shot. I'm quite happy with that wide shot. I might go a little bit tighter with the camera, but you can see here now that we've zoomed in, these are probably the right camera size shots for having my guest. Maybe I'd want to go a little bit tighter. The issue here is that whilst this looks right with nobody sitting in shot, once we've got someone sitting in shot, we probably need a bit more headspace. That's easy to sort. I'd come over to camera 2 and just make the virtual tilt, let's say +2, and camera 3, I'll make that +2 too, and then I'd render that out again. Once I'm happy with these shots, then I can just export them clicking on these buttons here. But the other thing to bear in mind is that whilst a wide shot, everything would be sharp and in focus, with a close-up shot like this, we generally would have a much lower depth of field. So that means the desk itself would probably be sharp, but the background would be slightly out of focus. So we can take care of that by just coming in here and defocusing our shot by pulling this defocus across, and you can see that blurs the background quite nicely. Now if I still wanted to use the desk and I wanted the desk sharp, then what I would do is I would export this shot twice, once defocused and then once sharp, because actually what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make a mask to go around this desk so that my real guest appears in the virtual studio sitting behind the virtual desk. Now I think with the new studios, the news desks, because they match the neon lighting and the design parameters of the whole studio, and that's what you would expect with a professional high-end TV studio, I think it's best to go with the AI generated desks with the news studios. Maybe that's the case also with the chat show studios, but with the podcast studios or the YouTube studios, my advice would very much be to come up to here and switch off the desk. So you click on no desk and it will render out the studio without a desk in it. But that would then mean that you would need to create your own desk in your virtual studio environment. So that's a quick tour of Studio Generator AI. Here is your Export vMix Studio Template button. There's help and tutorials up here. You can see your old creations by clicking on the Creations tab, and they'll pop up in here. So as you generate different studios, you can see them all here in this Creations tab. And you can also click on Account and see how many credits you've got left. If you don't want to upgrade your subscription plan, and there's 4 levels of subscription, which you can find by going to the Pricing tab here. So you can see the 4 levels of subscription. The vMix export, by the way, is only available on the Pro and the Studio. And on the hobby plan, which is just $10 a month, you don't get 4K output. You get more and more credits, of course, with each plan, with each subscription plan, but you can also go to the accounts page if you're on a lower subscription plan and just buy more credits as a credit pack. So that just makes it more cost effective to use Studio Generator AI. But don't forget, we don't just generate news studios. So let's click on this one. There's an international news studio, big news studio there. There are smaller studio designs. So a studio design like that, for instance, or maybe this one or this one. We have also got, if you click on this button here, chat show style studios. So these are kind of chat show studio designs here, some really nice designs that you can start from in terms of, and if you click these left and right arrows, it loads up lots of other designs as well. So some really nice chat show studios here. A little bit more difficult, if I'm honest, to navigate the design and placement of things like the chairs or the desks, or get consistency between the 3 camera angles, but you just have to tweak the prompt to try and get what you want. We have a section here of podcast studios, and they range anything from these moody sets to moody environments in your home. These moody little studios here. We've got lots in here. So there's a warehouse stuff. Well, that's not really a warehouse, but it's more like a kind of gothic home. We've got another one here. That's a bit more warehousey, but we do actually have a whole warehouse section here. We've got YouTube studios here, so you can have this kind of moody studio background here. We have a home library scenario, moodily lit webinar studio. If you don't like any of these, of course, you can. There's a home studio there. We have where is it? Multimedia studio. So if you want to make it look like you are in a high-tech multimedia environment, we've got a whole bunch of different high-tech kind of control rooms here that you can put yourself in, you and your guest, another multimedia studio there. So there's loads of those to explore. There's stacks and stacks of those. We also have office studios, so you can put your podcast in a modern, funky office if you want, and generate the different camera angles looking in different directions of this office space. We have warehouses. Actually, I think in here we have warehouses and old abandoned aircraft hangars and so on. So there's some really moody stuff in here. Some work better than others, if I'm honest, but I know this is being improved all the time. And then one that I really do like is the Gothic Studios. So this is more like cathedrals and churches and that kind of thing, to make it look like a really Gothic environment for your chat show or your studio or your webinar or whatever it is you want to create. And don't forget, once you've created this studio, all those camera angles can be added into your Creations tab. And the other thing as well is that you can create up to 4 camera angles in that plan view. Let me show you. If you come back down here, there is an add camera button. So you can add cameras all around this studio space. And with the standard plan, I think it's 4 cameras, but with the higher level plans, you can add up to 8 different camera angles of that same studio. So the point is, although those shots are probably quite zoomed in and quite narrow angle, at least all the backgrounds will match, and everyone watching will think that you are sitting in a massive, big, very expensive studio location, which of course adds enormous production value to whatever it is that you're filming and putting out online. So that's Studio Generator AI, which you can find at www.studiogenerator, all one word, .ai.